Proportional Response, Book 1. Chapter 22, Part 13, Feather-Bound Tactics. Everyone looked at Enibble, and he made a conscious effort to keep his hands from blushing. Someone needed to make the Byther get to a real point, and he seemed the best at doing such things without upsetting anyone. He started to speak, but Inthgal speared him with a decisive look and made the slightest gesture with one hand. Inthgal then continued.
The trouble is that those well-known facts are, like so many, not entirely correct. The Penigra care about the rest of us, mostly in as far as we can be used in their scheming against one another, which is their own primary pastime. In this, they much resemble Zoltan voters, except that their whole society is structured on a many-tiered, relatively immobile hierarchy rather than a single division line. You see,
Inthgal spoke the magic words, and Enibble felt the ghost of a smile cross his face, and saw a few others, but no one moved to stop the man.
The Penigra are concerned with one thing first, and always, their own social status amongst one another. How that status is determined is bewilderingly complex, and I have found that even most of them who are deeply entrenched in what they like to call the pastime are not always sure of some of the rules.
None.
A lot of the status relies on the crown though, and how he views them, or appears to view them. The nobles are constantly vying with one another for status, but the curious twist among them is that what you are always after is recognition from the next person, or two, maybe even three, above you in rank. What your peers think of you is of consequence only as far as your betters listen to them. It is.
Kaslor finally raised a hand to stop the man.
Ambassador Inthal, you may have noticed our amusement a moment ago. We have something of a standing rule among ourselves, that whenever the words you see are uttered, whatever follows is usually a level of technical detail that is too far into the weeds, and I am afraid you have gone far enough off the beaten path that we must bring you back. However, you should arrange a dinner with my lady, Her Grace Duchess Golner, sometime. She will be absolutely fascinated. For the moment, I am afraid.
Inthal waved his left hands.
Yes, sorry. I do get carried away sometimes. Occupational hazard, I guess. The short version is that they are a race which fell into decadence before most of us mastered rocketry. They barely pay attention to science, and even view its pursuit as somewhat barbaric. They also treat politics as a sport, and a blood sport at that. The Crown even allows armed conflicts,
Henry interrupted,
between the various houses, and has no issue with the leaders of the various houses allowing limited armed conflicts within their houses. The language they use for this is always about making sure that their militaries are sharp and battle-ready, but the way they fight is insane.
Duke Kaslor broke in.
Which, in this case, is polite for stupid.
Henry gave Kaslor a look, then continued.
They make these Altan military look agile and flexible, on top of the fact that they treat it as no more than another piece of the pastime, meaning that there are all kinds of silly rules they operate under, and the wars are more for the entertainment of the higher-ups, and possibly the masses, than about even settling the disputes. Hell, innovation and new tactics are not just discouraged.
Inthgal took back the narrative.
They are directly forbidden. Every commander must submit which strategies he intends to use ahead of time, and there is a lot of back and forth about what will or won't be allowed. You can completely sweep a battle, capturing every single member of your enemy alive without losing a single one of your own men, which is considered the highest form of victory you can achieve, and still lose because you used a strategy or tactic which was otherwise legal, but not approved for that particular engagement.
The Byther nodded and made an odd gesture with three of his hands, which Enibble's translator noted as a sign of approval.
You have apparently studied them at least enough to know the significance of my information then. Good. To start with, there is a maverick, for them, commander of high rank, who was forcibly retired for losing a battle in the way I just described. He did it because he was trying to convince the Crown and the rest of the nobles that they needed to take another look at the many new tactics he had been submitting for approval. He was humiliated publicly, stripped of his military rank, and lost a lot of social standing, but has continued to submit strategies and tactics. That is hardly germane to our current discussions, of course, except for the fact that he has been provisionally reinstated, and for the first time in generations, a new tactic was approved. In fact, they approved 3 of his tactics for use in future warfare, though he is still forbidden from commanding forces himself. The other tidbit of information I have is even more interesting in light of the first. The Crown has upped the military levy on all houses, meaning they will have to build more ships, and has forbidden live fire, armed conflicts of all kinds. They are still allowed to fight, of course, but using simulations and dummy rounds. The nobles are incensed about it, but their society is what it is, and none will issue more than a token protest.
She said.
These two facts, coupled with the Penigra directly covering for the Xultan just a few hours ago, makes me very concerned that they intend to enter the war in some capacity.
Enibel felt himself deflate a little. The Penigra in the war could tip the balance. For all of our victories, our hold on all of this is somewhat tenuous, and based partly on the fact that the humans can replenish their ships faster than the Ultans. Also, the Penigra are known to be fierce fighters, with all of their soldiers already battle-tested in their endless internal conflicts. Sure, they may be hidebound, but does that really matter that much? There are times I regret not being able to stomach learning more about military matters. His Bond brother sat forward in his chair, interrupting Enibel's train of thought. The man had sat back, pulling lightly on his lower lip, as the Byther spoke, but all sense of contemplation had vanished.
That is good to know, and a matter of concern, Ambassador Inthkal, thank you. I will be running all of this through my own analysts, of course, but I don't think it is something that should cause us a great deal of concern.
Inthkal and Golnar started to protest, but Henry held up a hand to forestall them.
It bears watching, of course, and we need to consider what it may mean, but I don't really see them entering the war on the side of the Sultans, not directly. Their support for the lizards has always been a prickly subject for them, and somewhat restrained, because they are a titular republic, despite the heavy-handed way they actually run things, and the birds just can't countenance that. It would also be nearly impossible for the Xultans to change to a monarchy. When they established their current republic, they had just thrown off a series of terrible dictators, one of which literally did kill off half of their population. Nearly 2 billion souls. Their current oligarchy built its hold on their populace with a narrative about the evils of monastic and dictatorial power, and has doubled down on that with each passing generation. So, it is most likely that, if the Penigra do enter the war in some fashion, it will be in a support and garrison role. I can almost tell you already what my own intel guys are going to make of this, which is that the Penigra will deploy to protect Sultan shipping lines from human predation. They have never liked privateers, and don't care much for upstart species. As for their military itself, the Confederated military is not that concerned. Sure, they have a small advantage in tech and tonnage, but their tactics. Ambassador, you say that they have approved less than a handful of this outcast's new tactics. I imagine that they fail spectacularly when they are used.
Inthkal shook his head.
No, in fact they tend to win, which has many of their commanders protesting that they are unfair. It is likely that at least one of them will be outlawed again soon.
Henry leaned back and spread his arms wide.
There you have it. If the birds decide to stop our privateers, then there will be little we can do. Lone pirates against hardened military battleships won't stand much of a chance, but that gambit has already done a lot of the damage we wanted it to anyway. I am far more concerned about this plan of theirs to place spies of their own throughout the Republic.
Golnar interrupted.
Yes. The Penigra are extremely set on hierarchy, and on everyone staying in their place. I expect that they are looking with a great deal of consternation at the seeds of rebellion Major Mendesh is planting, and want to see him dealt with, and Thien dealt with. Penigra do have some excellent spies in their midst. It is a large part of how their pastime is played. Additionally, the average Zoltan knows nothing about them, or any aliens, really, beyond the fact that their government says that all aliens are bad, and revolutionaries tend not to trust things their governments say.
Inthkal took up the dialogue.
Exactly, and you are welcome. My people have pegged the probability over 85% that the Penigran offer to help the Zoltans deal with their rebellion problem, whether Jalat or the Zoltan First Seat want the help or not.
Henry blinked a few times and looked a question at the Bether. Enibel caught the momentary delay before the insectoid answered. Inthkal had to wait for Henry's gestures to run through the translator. I always thought he was a student of body language to rival myself. The things you learn. Inthkal forwarded some data to them all as he spoke.
We have a great deal of difficulty maintaining spies within the Republic now that they don't trust most of their client species. That said, We know that Jalat and her circles have been in contact with the Pilgrim Crown on a number of occasions, and we suspect that Jalat herself has spoken with him directly, though we aren't sure whether she physically visited him or spoke. Over QCOM, we do know there was some contention over something between Jalat and both her circle and the Pilgrim Crown, and now surmise it was the Pilgrim plan to put spies throughout the Republic. It would have been quite helpful in dealing with Major Mendesh and his rebels in the short term.
Euro spoke up.
But would have been very difficult for the Exaltan to remove whatever spy networks they built. Particularly since best case estimates give it at least another year before all the refugees are exfiltrated. A true spy master with a year behind opposing lines, with the blessing of the opposition, with a free hand to build a network. I've got spy masters who would wet their beds at a chance like that.
Cass made an unpleasant face.
So, in stopping the Penigra from interfering with Major Mendesh, we have also done something that could help the voters in the long term.
Henry chuckled, but spoke in hard tones.
The voters won't be in power for long enough for the long term to matter. You all know that.